When was the last time you experienced a moment without worry, not pretending to be strong, not forcing a smile to mask the quiet ache inside, but truly feeling light, present, and free in a way that reached deep into the places where tension usually hides? Many of us live in a state of perpetual postponement, holding happiness at a distance, convinced that it can only be claimed once every condition is met, once the work feels secure, the relationship stable, the health reliable, the finances comfortable, the future less uncertain. We tell ourselves that when everything finally falls into place, then we will allow ourselves to breathe fully, to rest without reservation, to feel at peace. But that flawless day never quite arrives. Life continues to move, to surprise, to challenge, to remain unfinished. And so the waiting becomes not a phase, but a way of existing, quietly exhausting, subtly pervasive, turning even ordinary moments into something we endure rather than inhabit. In our modern world, we are surrounded by more information, more stimulation, more possibilities than any generation before us. Yet genuine inner peace often feels more distant than ever. The mind races constantly ahead of the actual moment, worrying about what tomorrow might bring, regretting what yesterday did bring, replaying conversations that cannot be changed, projecting scenarios that may never unfold. Worry has become the default background. No dramatic crisis required, no specific threat necessary. It simply lives there, a low-level static we learn to carry, draining vitality drop by drop until we wake one day realizing how tired we have become, how much of life we have lived half-present, how many small joys have passed unnoticed while we were mentally elsewhere. When was the last time you were truly here, whole, undivided, without a portion of your attention already 5 minutes into the future or 10 years back into the past? How many of the fears that once tightened your chest, shortened your breath, kept sleep at bay, never actually materialized? How much energy did you spend rehearsing disasters that never arrived? How many nights did you lie awake defending against possibilities that remained only possibilities? The mind is extraordinarily skilled at creating suffering in realms that do not yet exist, and we pay the price in the only realm that does, right now. Buddhist wisdom does not arrive with the promise that all problems will vanish, or that life can be made permanently safe through effort or insight. It offers something both more modest and more profound, a way of being with whatever arises, so that we are no longer swept completely off our feet by it. The intention here is not to teach you how to eliminate worry once and for all, for the attempt to eradicate it often becomes its own new source of tension, but to understand worry so clearly, so compassionately, that it loses its power to dictate your inner experience. Through seeing its origins, its impermanence, its illusory nature, we discover we can meet it without being owned by it. The present moment is the only place where real peace has ever truly existed. Worry cannot survive here. It has no roots in the now. Every anxious thought depends entirely on either memory or imagination, on what has already passed or what has not yet come. Remove those two supports, and what is left is simply this: the gentle movement of breath entering through the nostrils, filling the chest or belly with coolness, then releasing warmth back into the room. The subtle pressure of your feet against the floor, your back against the chair, your hands resting wherever they rest, the soft texture of light touching your skin, the quiet sounds that surround you without demanding attention. This is where life is actually happening, not in the story the mind tells about yesterday, not in the forecast it makes about tomorrow, but here, in the raw immediacy of sensation, of being. Suffering emerges precisely from the separation between body and mind, when the body is in one place and the mind is somewhere else entirely. We spend so much time living elsewhere the presence begins to feel unfamiliar, almost effortful. The body may be seated quietly, yet the mind is already drafting tomorrow's difficult conversation, replaying yesterday's small humiliation, or scanning the horizon for threats that exist only as mental images. This chronic dislocation creates a background of unease, a subtle but persistent friction inside, because the fullness of life is unfolding right here in the rise and fall of the breath, in the warmth of blood moving through the hands, in the simple miracle that the heart continues its steady rhythm without any instruction from us, yet we are rarely there to receive it. There is a story drawn from Zen traditions, a variation of ancient Buddhist teachings on presence, involving a disciple and his master in a quiet monastery. The disciple, a young monk named Feiyan, was preparing for a pilgrimage, dressed in his simple robes, with a staff in hand and a small pack on his back. He approached his teacher, Dezang, who noticed his student's distant gaze and asked, "Where are you going?" Feiyan replied, "Around on pilgrimage." Dezang probed further, "What is the purpose of pilgrimage?" Feiyan paused, then admitted humbly, "I don't know." Dezang smiled and said, "Not knowing is nearest." This exchange highlights the essence of the split between body and mind. Feiyan's body was in the monastery, but his mind was already wandering the paths ahead, anticipating the unknown, worrying about what he might encounter or fail to find. In the broader Buddhist context, this mirrors tales where the Buddha himself would observe disciples whose physical forms were present in the assembly hall or under the Bodhi tree, but whose thoughts drifted to future duties, past regrets, or imagined scenarios. The Buddha would gently inquire, "Where are you?" Not to scold, but to illuminate the division, the body anchored in the physical space of the monastery, with its cool stone floors, the scent of incense lingering in the air, the distant chant of fellow monks echoing softly, while the mind roamed into realms of anxiety about tomorrow's teachings, the uncertainty of enlightenment, or the fear of falling short. This split, the Buddha taught, is the root of unrest, for it fragments our being, turning what could be a moment of serene awareness into a battlefield of distraction. The disciple in such stories often laughs uneasily at first, recognizing the absurdity, but then, through the master's compassion, begins to see how this habitual wandering robs us of the peace that is already available. In one extended version from later commentaries, the disciple spends the day trying to catch his mind, only to find it slipping away again and again, like a fish in a stream, until he realizes that the act of noticing the wander is itself the return. The Buddha's insight here is profound. When we live divided, peace eludes us. Only when mind and body align in the present does harmony emerge, like the sun breaking through clouds after a long rain. No external change is required before you can begin. You do not need life to become less complicated, less painful, less unpredictable first. You only need to return gently, repeatedly, without self-criticism. Wherever you find yourself right now, pause. Notice the contact points, feet on floor, seat against legs, air brushing across your face or arms. Follow one full breath from beginning to end. Coolness entering, gentle expansion somewhere in the torso, warmth leaving, softening, and in the quiet space after the exhale, simply recognize, right now, I am here. Nothing dramatic, nothing to achieve, just that small, honest acknowledgement. With repetition, this return becomes less an exercise and more a natural inclination, a homecoming to the only place peace has ever truly lived. Reflect on this deeply. The present is not a destination to reach after solving all problems. It is the ground beneath your feet, always available, always supporting you. Imagine the disciple, after years of practice, sitting in the same monastery, now with a mind that no longer races ahead or lingers behind, experiencing the simple joy of a leaf falling outside the window, the sound of a bell ringing in the distance, the texture of the robe against skin. This is the freedom that comes from reuniting body and mind, not through force, but through gentle awareness. It teaches us that every moment we spend elsewhere, is a moment lost to life itself, and every return is a step toward liberation from the chains of distraction. Ponder how often we forfeit the richness of now for the illusions of then or when, and how reclaiming presence transforms ordinary experiences into profound ones, filling the heart with a quiet contentment that no future achievement could match. Acceptance is not surrender in the sense of giving up or collapsing. It is the liberating act of stopping the inner argument with what has already occurred. Most of the suffering we carry does not originate in the bare facts of what happens. A relationship ends, a plan collapses, health falters, a loved one suffers, but in the immediate, fierce protest that follows. This should not be so. I should have handled it differently. Things were supposed to turn out another way. This is unfair. This is wrong. That refusal, that mental and emotional rebellion, becomes a second wound layered upon the first. The Buddha once offered the image of two arrows, a parable that has echoed through centuries of teaching. As the story goes, the Buddha asked his student, "If a person is struck by an arrow, is it painful?" The student nodded. "Yes, of course it is." The Buddha continued, "If the person is struck by a second arrow, is it even more painful?" The student agreed. Yes, two arrows would cause greater suffering. The Buddha then explained that in life, we cannot always avoid the first arrow, the pains that come unbidden, like illness, loss, betrayal, or disappointment. These are the inevitable wounds of existence, striking everyone without exception as part of the human condition in a world of impermanence and change. But the second arrow is the one we inflict upon ourselves, the resentment that festers like poison in the wound, the self-blame that digs deeper into the flesh, the endless questioning of why me, or how could this happen, that turns acute pain into chronic torment. In extended versions of the parable found in Buddhist texts, the Buddha illustrates this with a warrior on the battlefield struck by an enemy's arrow. The warrior could pull it out and seek healing, but instead he lies there lamenting, "Who shot this arrow? What was their intention? Why did it hit me? What if another comes?" All the while, the wound worsens, infection sets in, and suffering multiplies. The Buddha emphasizes that while the first arrow is beyond our control, the second is optional, born from our reaction, our resistance, our attachment to how things should be. This teaching spread among his disciples, who shared stories of applying it. One monk, facing criticism, felt the first arrow of hurt, but chose not to fire the second of anger, finding peace instead. Another, losing a loved one, grieved the loss but released the blame, allowing healing to begin. The parable reminds us that suffering is compounded by our narratives, our judgments, our unwillingness to accept the raw event as it is. Acceptance is the moment we choose not to shoot the second arrow. We do not have to like what happened. We do not have to approve of it. We do not even have to stop wishing it were otherwise. We simply stop insisting that reality should conform to our preferences. We look at what is and allow the words to form quietly inside. This has happened. In that soft, honest recognition, something inside unclenches. The body softens, the breath deepens. The energy once bound in resistance is freed for grieving, for understanding, for taking the next step from a place of clarity rather than contraction. When something painful arises, whether a memory, a current difficulty, or an anticipated one, try whispering to yourself, "This has happened." Let the phrase land without force, without hurry. Notice what changes in the body, in the breath, in the quality of attention when the war with what is pauses, even briefly. Acceptance is not weakness. It is the foundation of strength that no longer needs to exhaust itself fighting against the already true. Reflect on this further. Imagine the warrior in the parable, after years of battles, learning to tend the first wound without adding more. He stands taller, moves lighter, because he no longer carries the weight of self-inflicted pain. In our lives, every time we accept a setback not as defeat, but as the current reality, we open space for growth, for compassion toward ourselves and others. Ponder how resistance turns moments into prisons, while acceptance transforms them into pathways. Consider a time when you fought against a truth, a failed expectation, a broken heart, and how the struggle prolonged the hurt. Now envision releasing that fight, feeling the lightness that follows, the clarity that emerges. This Chiem Ngiem invites us to see acceptance as a gentle power, one that aligns us with life's flow rather than against it, allowing us to respond with wisdom instead of reactivity, to heal rather than harm ourselves further. It teaches that true peace comes not from changing the world to fit our desires, but from softening our grip on those desires, embracing what is with open hands and an open heart. Thoughts are not truth, they are transient events in the vast field of awareness. Worry typically begins with something small and innocent. A single question drifts in, what if this fails? And almost before we notice, the mind has constructed an entire world around it. Detailed scenes of disaster, accompanying emotions that feel visceral, bodily sensations that convince us the threat is already here. Yet, none of this has crossed from imagination into actuality. The suffering arises because we fuse with the story. We become the narrator, the protagonist, the victim, forgetting there is a quiet witness who can simply observe the narration itself without being entangled in it. There is an old parable, often shared in Zen circles, as a lesson on letting go, of two monks traveling together on a rainy day. They came to a river swollen with floodwaters, where a young woman stood, unable to cross because the current was too strong, and she feared ruining her silk dress or being swept away. The elder monk, without hesitation, picked her up, carried her across the river on his back, and set her down gently on the other side. The younger monk was shocked, for their monastic vows forbade touching women. The two continued their journey in silence, but the younger monk brooded, his mind churning with judgment and confusion. Finally, miles later, he could hold it no longer and burst out, "How could you carry that woman? Our rules forbid it." The elder monk replied calmly, "I set her down by the river. Why are you still carrying her?" This story, a variation of the man carrying rocks across the river, illustrates how we burden ourselves unnecessarily. In some retellings, the rocks are literal. A traveler loads his pack with stones to steady himself against the current, but forgets to unload them on the other side, trudging onward under needless weight until exhaustion forces him to stop and question why. The parable expands in teachings where the Buddha uses it to show how thoughts are like those rocks or that woman, useful perhaps in a moment, but harmful if clung to long after their purpose is served. Disciples hearing this would reflect on their own carried burdens, past grudges, future fears, seeing how the mind hoards them like treasures, only to suffer from the load. One extended version describes the younger monk's inner turmoil. He replays the scene over and over, judging his master, worrying about consequences, until his steps slow and his shoulders ache from imaginary weight, while the elder walks freely, enjoying the path. We do much the same with thoughts. We carry old anxieties, future dreads, repetitive judgments long after they have ceased to be useful, simply because we have not yet recognized we can lay them down. The practice is extraordinarily simple, yet it can be revolutionary. When a fearful, contracting, or repetitive thought arises, pause for just a heartbeat and note silently, "This is a thought." No need to argue with it, no need to push it away, no need to believe it or disbelieve it, just clear, non-reactive seeing, without judgment, without pursuit. Over weeks and months, this small gesture creates space between awareness and the content of awareness. In that space, worry loses much of its automatic authority. It reveals itself as passing weather rather than as the permanent sky. Reflect on this deeply. Thoughts are like guests in a house. They arrive, stay a while, depart. When we treat them as permanent residents, we overcrowd our inner space, leading to chaos. Imagine the younger monk, after years, finally releasing his mental burden, feeling the lightness of unencumbered travel. In our lives, every unexamined thought we carry adds weight. A slight at work becomes a story of inadequacy. replayed until it shapes our self-view. A fear of loss becomes a constant guard, robbing us of joy in relationships. Ponder how identifying a thought as just a thought strips it of power, like seeing a shadow monster as merely a coat on a hook. This Chim Yem encourages us to cultivate the witness within, that calm observer who sees thoughts rise and fall without attachment. Consider times when a single thought spiraled into hours of distress, and how labeling it might have shortened the cycle. Extend this to daily life. During a commute, notice worries about the day ahead. Say, "This is a thought," and return to the sensation of driving, the road unfolding. Over time, this builds resilience, transforming the mind from a stormy sea to a serene lake, where thoughts ripple but do not overwhelm. It reminds us that wisdom lies not in suppressing the mind, but in befriending it, understanding its habits, and choosing not to follow every path it offers. Impermanence is the gentle medicine that slowly dissolves the belief that this difficult feeling, this fear, this grief, this tightness will endure forever. Whenever a strong emotion takes hold, the instinctive reaction is to assume permanence. This anxiety will never leave. This sadness will define me from now on. This contraction will be my new normal. Yet look back over your own life. Every intense state you have ever experienced has eventually changed form. Every storm you once thought would never end has passed, leaving clearer air behind it. Every wave of emotion that has risen in you has also crested and receded. The story of Kisa Gotami and the mustard seed is one of the most poignant parables in Buddhist lore, illustrating impermanence through profound grief. Kisa Gotami was born into poverty in Savatthi, but married into a wealthy family. Treated poorly at first, her status changed when she bore a son whom she adored. But tragedy struck when the child, just old enough to play, fell ill and died. Overcome, Kisa refused to accept it, carrying his body door to door, begging for medicine to revive him. Villagers pitied her, saying the child was dead, but she persisted, her mind fractured by sorrow. Directed to the Buddha, she approached him, pleading, "Lord, give me medicine for my son." The Buddha, seeing her desperation, said, "I can help, but you must bring me a mustard seed from a house where no one has died." Hopeful, Kisa went house to house. At each door, families offered seeds but shared their losses: a mother, her child; a wife, her husband; an elder, their family. As stories accumulated, Kisa realized death touched every home. Her grief was universal, not unique. Returning to the Buddha empty-handed, she said, "I could not find such a seed." The Buddha gently explained, "All beings are subject to death. Nothing is permanent." Touched, Kisa buried her son, ordained as a nun, and through practice attained enlightenment, composing verses on impermanence. In extended tellings, her journey spans days, with vivid encounters: a widow sharing widowhood's loneliness, a father recalling a daughter's fever. Each story mirrored her pain, softening her isolation, showing life's fleeting nature like bubbles on a stream. When fear, sadness, or anxiety takes hold, remind yourself quietly, "This too shall pass." Not as a way to dismiss the feeling, but as a truthful reflection of reality. Emotions arise, abide for a time, and eventually dissolve. You are not trapped in this moment forever. You are simply passing through it. Reflect deeply on Kisa's transformation. Her grief didn't vanish instantly, but understanding impermanence shifted its hold, allowing space for acceptance and growth. Ponder your own losses, how time softened edges once sharp, how what felt eternal faded. This Kiyam Giyam invites us to embrace change as ally, not enemy. Resisting impermanence multiplies suffering, while flowing with it brings ease. Consider impermanence in joy too. Cherish moments knowing they pass, making them sweeter. Extend to daily fears. A worry about tomorrow is temporary. Remind yourself, this feeling will change. Over time, this builds equanimity, a steady heart amid life's flux, like a tree bending in wind but rooted deep. Letting go of control is not an act of helplessness, it is an act of wisdom. Worry is born directly from the illusion that if we think enough, plan thoroughly enough, anticipate every possibility, we can compel life to follow our preferred script. We shoulder responsibility for things far beyond our influence, other people's choices, the timing of events, the weather of health and circumstance, and in carrying that impossible load we exhaust ourselves. The parable of the farmer and the rain, often told as the farmer with 83 problems, illustrates this beautifully. A farmer sought the Buddha, listing woes. I love farming, but sometimes it doesn't rain enough. Crops fail, we nearly starve. Other times it rains too much. Yields are poor. My sons are good, but lazy. My wife is kind, but nags. Neighbors gossip. He had 83 problems. The Buddha listened, then said, I cannot help with those 83, but perhaps with the 84th. Confused, the farmer asked what? You want no problems? The Buddha replied, everyone has problems 84 or more. If you solve these 83, new ones arise. That's life. The farmer protested, but the Buddha explained, farming is your work, but rain is not yours to control. Do your part, plant, tend release the rest. The farmer left enlightened, focusing on what he could influence. In variations, the farmer prays for rain, but learns to prepare for drought or flood, accepting nature's role. Another tells of a Zen farmer whose horse runs away. Neighbors say bad luck, he says maybe. It returns with wild horses, good luck, maybe. Son breaks leg taming one, bad luck, maybe. Army drafts youth but spares the son, good luck, maybe. It teaches non-judgment of outcomes. In any situation, pause and ask gently, what is truly mine to do in this moment? What is not mine? Offer your best to the first with wholeheartedness. Release the second with trust. That simple boundary can bring extraordinary relief. Reflect on the farmer's shift. By releasing control over rain, he freed energy for planting, family. In our lives, worry about uncontrollable elements like others' opinions or global events exhausts us. Focusing on our actions brings peace. Ponder times you obsessed over outcomes, how it drained you. Imagine releasing, feeling lighter. This Chiem Ngiem shows wisdom in discerning spheres of influence, fostering humility and resilience amid uncertainty. Worry is not your enemy. The more forcefully we resist it, criticize it, or attempt to drive it out, the more intensely it often returns. But when we turn toward it with compassion, as we might turn toward a frightened child in the dark, the tension begins to ease. The anxious inner voice is not malicious. It is an ancient, protective part of us that believes constant vigilance is the only way to stay safe. When we meet it with understanding rather than opposition, it softens because it finally feels acknowledged. The story of the Buddha and Angulimala is a dramatic tale of transformation through compassion. Angulimala, born ahimsaka, non-violent, was a brilliant student misled by jealous peers into believing his teacher demanded 1,000 fingers as tribute. He became a ruthless killer, wearing a necklace of fingers, terrorizing the countryside. Kings tried to capture him, but he evaded all. One day, the Buddha walked deliberately into his path. Angulimala, needing one more finger, chased him. Despite running full speed, he couldn't catch the Buddha walking calmly. The Buddha used psychic power to stay ahead. Exhausted, Angulimala shouted, "Stop!" The Buddha replied, "I have stopped. You have not stopped harming beings." These words pierced Angulimala, awakening remorse. He threw away his weapons, fell at the Buddha's feet, and requested ordination. The Buddha accepted him as a monk. King Pasenadi, hunting Angulimala, met the Buddha and learned of the conversion, sparing him. As a monk, Angulimala faced hostility from villagers who stoned him for past crimes, but the Buddha advised enduring as penance. Attaining enlightenment, Angulimala became a symbol of redemption, even helping a woman in labor with a blessing that eased births. When we speak to our own worry with gentleness, I see how afraid you are. I know you are trying to protect me, and right now we are safe enough to breathe together. We create an inner sanctuary. The voice no longer needs to shout to be heard. It can rest. Reflect on Angulimala's change. Compassion stopped what force could not. In our lives, treating inner fears with kindness dissolves them faster than battle. Ponder times you fought anxiety, how it grew. Imagine embracing it, feeling it soften. This Chiem Niem shows self-compassion as strength, turning inner conflict into harmony. Joy is not something we earn after life becomes perfect. It is a practice we can engage even when life remains imperfect. We have been conditioned to believe that happiness must wait until fear subsides, problems resolve, everything feels right. But that condition is perpetually receding. There is always another requirement just out of reach. The Buddha smiled, not because his life was free from difficulty, but because he had learned to rest in pure presence, meeting pleasure and pain alike with open awareness. Stories of the Buddha's smile abound, often signaling deep insight or compassion. In one, during a discourse, he twirled a flower and smiled at Mahakasyapa, who smiled back the transmission of Zen beyond words. Another, recalling past lives, he smiled at a spot, revealing it as a site of past tragedy, teaching impermanence. In the Lalitavistara, the newborn Buddha smiled after 7 steps, declaring his last birth. As an adult, facing Mara, he smiled, unmoved by illusions. His smile embodied equanimity amid suffering, not waiting for its end. Joy frequently appears in quiet forms. The warmth of sunlight on closed eyelids, the rustle of wind through trees, the simple fact that breath continues without effort or permission. The practice is to deliberately turn attention toward what is already good, already beautiful, already sufficient, even when difficulty coexists beside it. Notice the small miracles of the ordinary. Allow gratitude to become the underlying tone rather than a rare interruption. Reflect on the Buddha's smile as invitation to presence. Joy arises from full being, not perfect conditions. Ponder moments of unexpected delight amid hardship, a laugh with a friend during stress. This Chiem Niem teaches joy as cultivation, shifting focus from lack to abundance, illuminating life's inherent beauty. In the end, worry does not need to be destroyed. It only needs to be understood with patience, with clarity, with kindness. Peace is not hidden in a future when everything is finally resolved. It dwells in the moment you choose to pause, in the breath you take deliberately, in the decision to remain rather than escape. So right now, wherever this finds you, breathe in slowly, feel the cool air enter, breathe out fully, feel the softening, stay, just for this breath. Be present to the quiet aliveness that is already here. May each gentle return bring you closer to the freedom that was never truly gone, only briefly overlooked.